The Department of Governmental Efficiency, or DOGE as we like to call it, is this destined to go down in history as one of the biggest scandals of our time? Or will it be credited as one of the salvations of a really troubled economic situation? Let's unpack that in truth, not in fiction, on today's Steve Beaman Show. Welcome once again, my friends, to this episode of the Steve Beaman Show, where we try to unpack the challenging situations that we all find in our lives and bring some reality to it. We try to use a velvet glove when talking about some of these things, but we also can bring a hammer to it when it's necessary. So thanks for joining me once again. Now, as we discuss on today's show, we're going to go down through the DOGE situation. I'm not going to look at personalities of Elon Musk and Donald Trump because I think that's less important. I am going to look at the legality of it, the efficiency of it, the effectiveness of it, and see if, in fact, DOGE is going to become a solution for us or part of a solution to this fiscal problem that you and I have talked about. Again, we've talked in the past about $2 trillion deficits, $36 trillion debts, trillion-dollar trade deficits. Something's got to give somewhere. So we're going to look at DOGE and see if that has any positive potential impact. But let's begin, as we like to do, with a look at today's markets and what's going on around the world. Any of you who watch the markets know today we've seen an absolute bloodbath by historical terms. We're down about 3% on the Dow, 4% on the S&P, 5% on the NASDAQ, 5% in crypto. Oil prices have dropped off. Gold has dropped off. So it's been the kind of day that traders just don't like to have on Wall Street. But we know, you and I, that that's in response to Trump's April 2nd Liberation Day, in which he formally imposed tariffs, as we've talked, on the global economy. Now, the reality is the markets are reacting to fear, uncertainty, and doubt more than anything because there aren't real numbers yet. But we do know that countries like Canada, for example, has come out in response and said, we may just drop all tariffs against the U.S. Well, that would be a win-win for everybody, and we hope that countries continue to do that. I think Israel came out today and said they were thinking of dropping their tariffs. So I think we have an opportunity here to reset things. Let's keep in mind these are not retaliatory, but they're considerate tariffs on everybody else. They're looking and saying, if you've tariffed us 30%, we're going to tariff you 10%. I think on average, the metric the Trump team is using is about 35% of the all-in tariffs being charged. So if we look at China and we look not just at the tariffs they charge, but the currency manipulation they do and the regulatory costs they impose on American companies, I think Trump took that and said, let's give it 35% of that and we'll call it a day. These are very much in response to other people's tariffs. These aren't new tariffs the U.S. is doing. And I want to point out, and I've talked to a lot of people since our last episode, that this is not the first time a president's done this. I mean, if you go back and look at Obama or Biden or Clinton or any of them, all of them talk about the need to get fairer trade and impose tariffs. I do think this is the first time we've seen such a broad imposition of something like this. And I think, frankly, for all concerned, we're going to see if it works. I think it will. I'm optimistic about that. But the fear, of course, is you'll get a trade war between the U.S., the European Union, the Russians, the Brazilians, and South America and China. Nobody wants that. And I think that's the risk we face. But time will tell. You know, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody today on a radio program that I've been asked to be on, and they said, why do you think Trump is leading the charge with these tariffs? Most people would want the tax cuts he's talking about or the regulatory relief to come first. And I made a comment, and I think I'll stand by it, and that is that the Trump administration is very sensitive to the time horizon they have to execute their plan. They know that if they don't get things turned around in the next 2 years, by the time of those midterms, the chance they have to continue their agenda is greatly diminished. So I think they looked at tax cuts. Well, that's going to take Congress. Regulatory relief, that works, but it's very slow into the economy. So we have to look at a third option here, which is to impose the tariffs right off the mark. And that is exactly what's happening here. So I think the Trump administration can be given a little leeway here. I'm not guaranteed that this will work, but I'm optimistic that it will. And I think in the near term and short term, we're going to find out. Again, if Canada and Israel are any indication, we're going to have countries negotiating with the Trump administration to open up more free trade around the world. You know, another side of this, I was on a radio program this morning and we were talking about this, and the economist I was talking to is what I'll think of as a global economist. And by that, what I mean, it's not bad, but they're looking out for the economy of the globe in general. And they're saying, or his comment was, these tariffs can only raise the cost of doing business globally. So this is inherently a bad thing. Well, I tend to look at it more as an America firster, which I am. And if you look at it as America first, well, then these things are probably necessary right now. And I think at the end of the day, when they play out, we'll have a stronger America for it. Let's remember, we've already had commitments of capital coming into the country. We have commitments of manufacturing, redomesticating to the U.S. So I think we're seeing some indication that this bludgeoning device is working as a negotiation tool. Time will tell. We'll certainly keep a close eye on the markets for you. And if you ever have questions, just write me at questions@stevebeamanshow.com. We're pretty active and you can see us on social media. So if you have questions about the markets or what's going on, feel free to ask. I'm obviously here and happy to answer those for you. That's why we exist. I did want to mention, we talked in a prior program about my friend down at Newsmax, Chris Ruddy. His company came out a couple of days ago at $10 a share, ran up to 85 and then to over 200. Well, in today's sell-off, it came back down to 54. So I'm sorry for Chris and the people on that, but it's still a highly successful IPO going from 10 to 54. So kudos once again to Newsmax, but quite the sell-off that they've got going on there. But again, if you look at today's market, I wouldn't get too worried about it. That's about a 14% drop year to date. That's not something that's unheard of in the markets. Typically, you'll see a 10% drop once a year. A 14 to 20% drop you see maybe every 2 years. So this is not a good one. We don't like to see this. Clearly, if you're retiring or in retirement with your 401k or your stock portfolios, you don't want to see this. But I think you can look at it with some semblance of perspective. And right now, frankly, may become a buying opportunity. In fact, it won't surprise me if Warren Buffett and some of his money comes into the market at these prices. So we'll see what happens, but we'll keep you posted. And again, feel free to ask questions and ask away. The other thing I like to do is kind of a quick review of prior podcasts. We talked heavily about Social Security last time, and we've talked about a lot of it. The fact that it's not an insurance program, it's what you can think of as a pay-as-you-go program that was created in the late 30s. Really, it's not a Ponzi scheme per se, but it is a wealth transfer program. And we talked about the problems with it, the biggest problems being, if nothing else, demographics. Following the last podcast, somebody had asked me about those demographics and they asked me to look into it. I said, sure. So if you look at the American population right now, as you get in the middle, let's say 35 to 39-year-olds, that's our biggest population bubble. It's about 6.7% of the economy. If you go out on the older side, get above 70, and it starts to drop off precipitously below 5%. Well, so those 70-year-olds have that group, that 6.7% paying for them. That's where the money's currently being transferred. But here's the kind of scary thing, and this is what has a lot of people worried. Again, keep in mind, demographics are very slow to change. So once they're in place, well, they're going to play out. Right now, the lowest growth group, the smallest group, are people in 0 to 5. That's about a little over 5% of the population. That's a very small percentage. And so what you have is a bubble, and you have a histogram, just a normal distribution, let's say. But that group of the 35 to 39 is moving older, and this smaller group is coming in. Well, the problem you have with that, of course, is you have fewer people paying for those benefits. In 1940, when it started, I think we talked about there were 5.1 people or workers per retiree. Well, that clock rolling forward right now, it's about 2.3 or 2.6 employees for every retiree. Roll that clock forward 20 years and it's even less. So we have this demographic problem, in addition to which we have this age problem. When the system was put in place, you may recall, retirement was set at 65 with an average lifespan of 62. Well, today it's still basically 65, but lifespans are 76, 77. So when you look at that demographic shift of the fewer people coming in to pay for this and the longer we're living on the back end, that's a recipe for long-term disaster. So what is the solution? And we talked about three of them. You can raise taxes. You can means test the program so that if you've saved enough money, you don't get your share. Or you can adjust the retirement age. And as much as I may upset some people, I think if you were looking at this program to save it and extend its life for a long period of time, I think you have to go to the extend the retirement age. Let's take it up to 70 at this point, or rolling forward. I think if you do that, you can extend the life of this and you can protect it from what will otherwise be a real problem in about 20 years. We don't want to see that evolve. So I hope that the elected politicians will look to address this with the American people and find a positive solution. Yes, you can raise taxes a bit, not by raising percentages, but by increasing the bottom line of it. I think, as we said, it's $160,000 now as a cap for your FICA payments. Well, you can raise that to 170, 180, 200. People won't scream, but it's not going to make them happy. And that is somewhat it's not good for the economy, and because when you're taking that money away, you're depressing the economy. So we don't really want to see that. I think the cleanest way is just to see an increase in the retirement age so you don't pull benefits out way before you die. Remember, it was never intended to be a long-term sustainable retirement program. It was designed to be an emergency program for a few years before and after your death. So I think we need to look at Social Security in a big way. So let's take a quick look and let's dive into this DOGE thing. My goodness. Some things in our society give you, I don't even know what to call it, but a lightning rod for, negative commentary. And I think DOGE is one of those. Is this good? Is it bad? Or what is it? And let's just think about it together and talk about it today. Clearly, DOGE is the Department of Government Efficiency created by the Trump administration in concert with one Elon Musk. And there's not one of us who doesn't know who he is. On the good side, he's the Thomas Edison of our day. He's created basically the electric car industry. He has created the reusable rocket. He has recreated the ability of the United States to put people into the outer space. I mean, this guy is a phenomenal talent. He built PayPal. He's done remarkable things in his life. The problem you have now is a lot of people are saying he's so close to the president that he's a shadow president. I don't know about that. I don't happen to think he is. If you look back at presidents in general, Roosevelt had the wealthiest of the wealthiest involved. And by the way, if you will bear with me, I like to check my phone because I do get texts from time to time. And I want to make sure always that it's going on for all. So, yeah, that's just a question I'll answer in a little bit. But Roosevelt did this. He had the chairman of Goldman Sachs in his brain trust, and he was every bit as involved as Elon Musk is with Donald Trump. So it's not unprecedented. Nixon had his. John Kennedy had a little different approach. John Kennedy said, hey, I'm going to bring in the brain trust. And he did. He brought in people that were World War II veterans. Were they the wealthiest people in the world? Not in aggregate, but they weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Robert McNamara came out of, I think it was McKinsey or one of those think tanks. He was doing pretty well by himself when he took over. But we have to understand that the presidents need to be surrounded by the best and the brightest if possible. Yes, Elon is, he's a little bit on the anomaly side, but he's not what I'm here about. I think personalities and all that can go by the wayside. Let's look at what DOGE is actually doing, because that's the relevance. Let's go back. We have a $2 trillion deficit. Now, I want to revisit that math because it's so critically important. The government brings in today about $5 trillion. Okay. Let's look where that money goes. 1.4 trillion of it is Social Security. So that is right off the top. The next 1.7 trillion is Medicare and Medicaid. That brings the total to 3.1 trillion. Now, if we add interest on that, interest on this debt, it's about another trillion. So now we're at $4.1 trillion. Throw defense on it, $900 billion, and there you are. You've spent your $5 trillion. So everything else the government does, school programs, agricultural programs, foreign aid programs, anything else is borrowed money. So what the Trump administration's position was, let's get a group that's highly technically capable and have them come in and look for three things: waste, fraud, and abuse. I would think you cannot really dispute the fact that since DOGE has been doing its job, we've kind of found examples of all three. Now, the hope is through the Trump administration that they'll be able to save us $1 trillion of that excess money. So we cut it down to $6 trillion or $1 trillion deficit. Does it look like they can? Again, the jury's out, but I think it's relevant to understand that up to this point, they've secured, and what I have the number, and I saved it because I knew it would become very important. They're looking today, and I think the latest number out of DOGE that I could get is they think they've saved already $140 billion of spending on the part of the government that was completely unnecessary. I go back to this. I don't believe this is a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. I think it's a populist issue. It's for us. Nobody wants to see $140 billion thrown away. Now, you can argue and say, well, some of it's not thrown away. So maybe, we're missing a bit, but most of it has been stuff that most Americans say that's a waste of money. Some of that is in waste, where we have office buildings that are completely vacant, or we have people who are working that have absolutely no job description. I was watching one of the news networks recently, and I saw an interview with a guy who works in the Department of Health and Human Services somewhere way down the line. He hasn't had a job for 2 years. He said he goes into the office every day, has breakfast, then he goes to work out. He's written a couple of books, but there's nobody else in the office. That's clearly wasteful. Nobody wants that. I'm not suggesting for a moment that all federal workers are bad people. I don't think they are. I think most of them are committed to doing a fine job. But at the margin, where you're looking at $6 trillion or $7 trillion being spent, there is a lot of waste inherently, and everybody knows it. Barack Obama knew it. Bill Clinton knew it. Joe Biden knew it, all of whom called for cutting the waste in the federal government. Of $6 trillion, if we look at this and say 10% of it's waste, well, that's $600 billion. That's a lot of money. So we're starting to see at scale savings that could bring down these deficits. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't think that's good. If we look at employment right now, we're looking, I think DOGE lopped off 216,000 federal employees in March. It's a big number. But again, let's put that in context. The government has 3 trillion employees worldwide, or 3 million, employees worldwide. So we're looking at less than 10% of the workforce being affected. Now, the reality is most companies could let go 10% of the people and be okay. We're not gutting the government. This isn't some 50% of the people are being let go. We're talking less than 10% so far have been let go. But we do think it can save us $600-700 billion in the long run. Again, we're 150 billion or 140 billion into it so far. So what DOGE is trying to do is highlight where the waste and fraud are. Now, if you look at fraud, and we will touch on that because I think it's highly relevant. And again, if you're a millennial or a Gen Z or any of us who are in the real world, this stuff should frost you. What they have found is that using these non-governmental organizations, which are typically tax-free foundations, okay, so they're charitable. What happens is the government gets money in, and then it turns around and it gives that money or donates it, grants it to a charity. Well, the charity may or may not have any controls on where that money goes. So the people running the charity are living very much off the fat of the land, nice cars, nice houses, nice lifestyle. Well, that's not the intent of that money. Now, again, I'm not saying all of it happens that way, but 10% of it, you can bet on it. And this has been found to make some of these politicians' friends very, very wealthy. That, I think, all of us can say is just wrong. We don't want our government to be one in which if you know a congressman, you get wealthy. That's not right. I think you'd say it's wrong and I'll say it's wrong. So we've seen this fraud. We've seen this waste. Is it possible DOGE can save $600 billion, $1 trillion? It looks like they're going to be able to. Now, the other thing they're doing, and this is for those of you who work in government, and you know what I'm about to say is true, the average governmental worker isn't living high on the hog. They make a pretty decent wage, pretty good benefits, but in their work environment, they're not given the latest, greatest technology, not in the least. That gets to be a real problem. Most of them are living in 20-year-old technology or 30-year-old technology. And again, pardon me, but I keep getting text. And those are questions from people who come through questions at stevebeamanshow.com. And that's wonderful because I'm glad to see those. But continuing on that thought, what you have for the average government worker is an inability to fight with current technology. They're struggling to use older technology. And I think what's happening is the DOGE people are saying, wait a minute, we need to upgrade this technology because, frankly, that's what's keeping you to be so inefficient. There's thoughts that within the IRS, you could cut 20 to 30% of the workforce and not lose any of the efficacy of the IRS. Well, again, who wouldn't do that? This stuff just makes sense. That's the positive of DOGE. If they're successful, they cut out the waste, they upgrade the technology so that the abuse of these systems can slow down, and they eliminate some of the fraud. It's entirely possible that we're going to get that $1 trillion savings. And that would be very good because cut the budget by $1 trillion without losing any services. Any services, no customer service drawback, nothing. That's a good thing. Grow the economy through the $3 trillion of new capital. It's a winning equation. We have to have it work. So I would just hope that if you're looking right now at the DOGE situation, don't get caught up in the personality of Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, he's just a guy who's there with his technical expertise, trying to have a team, and it's a team doing the work. It's not him personally. But they're looking at this stuff saying, wait a minute, these systems are antiquated. These systems are out of date. These systems are fraud. These systems are unused. Let's go in and try to at least give it to the policymakers to fix it. Understand DOGE has no authority of its own. So it can't go in and let people go. It has to go up through the department secretary who run these things and have them execute the plans. Now, there are some exceptions to that. And I think this is important for us to talk about because it's in the way we learn more about how our government works. And I know there are cabinet officials. There's the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Health and Human Services. I think there are 10 of them, something like that. I thought everybody in government in the executive branch reported up through one of those secretaries. Well, I was wrong. That's not really true. We know the Fed is extraordinary on that. It works outside of the normal governmental procedures where it's a quasi-independent organization. I didn't realize, so is the Social Security Administration. So is the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. So is the, what's the one Elizabeth Warren did? The Consumer Product or Protection Bureau. All of these work outside of the normal parameters of the cabinet secretaries. They don't really report to anybody. That's another reason you look at Social Security and say, why is it in so much trouble? Well, it doesn't report to anybody. Look at a company system. You have a board of directors hired by the shareholders. Now, again, I'm giving you the perfect scenario. I know somebody's going to be able to say, no, that's not how it works. In design, the board works for the shareholders. They're the owners. The board then hires the president to say, build your team and execute on the vision that we hold for this enterprise. The president then hires the vice presidents and all the departments to run it. But ultimately, that president is the guy that holds the weight. The buck stops there. In government, what we have is very different. We, the people, are supposed to be the shareholders. We're supposed to have the final say in this vision stuff. But because it's so big and so vast, we delegate that to the president of the United States. We say, Mr. President, in concert with Congress and the courts, we want you to execute this type of thing. Well, the president then goes down to his cabinet secretaries and says, okay, you guys do what we think needs to be done. The problem is that president goes over to these other departments. They don't work for him. The Fed does not report to Donald Trump. You could say that's a good thing. Good or bad, I don't know, but it doesn't. But neither does Social Security. So it gets all of this 1.4 trillion coming in, and there's no control on where it goes. That's the shocking part. When they've come out, and we have shown, in fact, that there are people over 120 years old getting Social Security checks. Now, that's not the mainstream of it. It's not the norm, but it's there, and it's there because there's no accountability in Social Security. $1.4 trillion gets spent, and there's no accountability. That, to me, is something that none of us would want to see. We don't have this sense of no accountability in our lives. You do, I do, we all report to somebody. But if you're one of these government agencies, again, the SEC, the CFPB, these things don't have anyone they report to. So it creates a system of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's right where this DOGE effort is going to try to find it. Ultimately, will it be successful in it? We don't know yet. It seems to be finding some of this stuff, and it's some of the stuff that we really do like. We're looking for $1 trillion. They found 140 billion so far, and we think there's another 600 billion that will be shortcoming. That, forgive me, my little earpiece came out. You got to have technology when you run these things. So my apologies for that. But, we go back, this thing, we've got to have somebody looking at these to get us the cuts we need. Otherwise, we stand to be on a collision course with a devastatingly bad economy. And again, I think I was on the radio talking about this. The United States isn't going to go to war in the near future. That even with China, it's not going to happen because of our nuclear power. That's just not in the cards. But if you look at England at the end of the 19th century going into the 20th century compared to the U.S. today, there are a lot of parallels. In the late 19th century, coming into the 20th century, Great Britain was the world's power. It was said the sun never sets on the British Empire. They had the money, the manufacturing, the shipping. They had global footprint and global presence. They were the powerhouse of economies around the world. What happened? Well, they had a world war that soaked out their money. They had poor government that raised taxes and regulation that really sucked the economy dry. And after 100 years, by the end of the 20th century, they were a second-rate power. The standard of living for the average Englander had gone significantly down. Well, in my fear, that's what's going to happen here. If we don't deal with these problems and we continue to go down the path we're on, you could end up with our children and our grandchildren living significantly less lifestyle quality than we live. Again, directly talking to the Gen Xers and Gen Zs, no wonder they feel uncomfortable. If we don't change things, they're in a world of hurt. I think DOGE can be part of doing that. Now, again, let's throw out the personalities. Let's look at the realities. The reality is they're trying to find this waste, fraud, and abuse, and they seemingly are doing it. 140 billion today. We hope there's like 600 billion they'll find in total. But they are cutting back employment. They're cutting back the wasteful areas of government, and that's a good thing. You and I both can agree on that. We don't want to see them taking an overwhelming chainsaw to it, to use that analogy and that picture, but we do want significant change this time. We can't keep playing the game the way we've been playing it. If we do, there'll be nothing left. So I think as you look at that, again, my earpiece just keeps getting bugged. I'm sorry about that. But if we look at that in total, we look and say DOGE is a valiant effort. It's a good thing that we're trying to do. Let's not have it be overwhelmingly impactful in that, specifically Elon Musk being a shadow president. Nobody wants that. By then, I'm going to digress a little on that too. There's a different dynamic in this White House than we've ever seen. And this is kind of important. Unlike prior White Houses, what you have now is a camaraderie among the senior staff, the cabinet level officers, between themselves and between that and the administration. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, the Department of Justice head, came out recently, was talking about how they all like each other. They all talk every night. This is rare. You don't see this kind of cooperation in most White Houses. I think what you're seeing with DOGE and with Elon Musk specifically, where he's a little overly friendly, bringing his kids into the White House and all that stuff, I think some of that's just because of that camaraderie they all have. That's not necessarily bad. I think many of us would like to see it toned down a bit. Not the camaraderie, but the Elon Musk part of it. Clearly, his shareholders would like to see that because it's not been pleasant on Tesla stock. But I think at the end of the day, Elon's not going to be the good or bad here. It's going to be the result of the DOGE effort. Did it find the $600 billion we were looking for or more and implement new strategies, new systems, and new technologies to improve the effectiveness and the ability of government and productivity of it going forward? I don't think we know the outcome of that yet. But there are a lot of issues that I've been asked on this. And one of the things comes into the legality of it. Is DOGE legal? And the answer is absolutely. This is very well within the parameters of a president's rights to have his own advisory staff. There's no question about that. The follow-on to that, though, is just because it's legal, is it ethical? And I think we have to say, yeah, absolutely, it can be. Doesn't mean it will be, but it can be. If all they're doing is going into these departments and trying to find that waste, fraud, and abuse, and extracting it out and highlighting it to people in a very open way, that's not a bad thing. And most of us would say that's highly ethical. If they become closed door about it and things are happening behind the scenes as opposed to in front of us where we can see it, then I think you run the risk of some unethical behavior. We don't want to see that. What we want is transparency at a high level, which we're getting today. We want that to continue so that we know that the efforts and the effects of DOGE are positive for the government and for the American people. And so is it legal? Yes. Is it ethical? Yes. Will we see Elon get more or less involved? I would argue that over time he'll become less involved. He's already kind of indicated the systems are built, the staff is built to run DOGE. It's not him, it's people around him. I think he's going to get bored with it and go back to building rockets and doing Tesla. I feel pretty confident of that. But either way, I hope you'll wish him well. We talked last time about Tim Waltz and a comment he made on how joyful he was at the collapse of Tesla stock. Oh, let's be realistic. That hurt the employees in Minnesota. It doesn't hurt Elon. He's got plenty. But it does hurt the people invested in Tesla through their 401ks or the mutual funds they own. So let's wish him well. But I think if we can eliminate some of the hatred and eliminate some of the negative feelings toward him, someone I respect greatly said it's creepy. I get that. But let's not look at him. Let's look at what DOGE is doing and what this committee is doing. And it really is trying to serve the president to say, where can I find waste, fraud, and abuse? Again, we found all three. So Are we going to be able to get good results out of it? I sure hope so. But again, it is legal. It is ethical. Will it be impactful? I think so. We're seeing that already. And I think there's a high probability at the end of the day, DOGE will go down in history as a good thing. I want to keep putting perspective on this. Barack Obama said he was going to cut the budget, get rid of the waste and fraud. You can search all over the speeches he's made. Bill Clinton did. All of the presidents do this. This isn't unique. The difference is the DOGE people are looking at it from a strategic standpoint, saying, okay, we're going to cut waste, but we're going to then impose new systems and technology that prevent that from getting wasteful in the future. That's the difference. Because what we've had in the past are these cuts on the budgets and then they just come back. Cuts on the budget, it just comes back. This time we're hoping you cut the budget and it stays down. Technology can do a lot of these jobs. It can replace a lot of these jobs. Let's use technology where we can. I tend to trust technology more than I trust people when it comes to IRS reporting. We've seen enough examples where the IRS has gotten political. I'd rather have a computer doing it. If you go look at ChatGPT and say, hey, I want you to do my taxes, it's not going to give you a political bias. It's going to give you fact. And I'd rather see the IRS deal in fact rather than political bias. So am I a fan of replacing some of the functionality of the IRS with artificial intelligence? You bet you I am. Absolutely. Do I think we can give better service to people through employing artificial intelligence and the cloud and blockchain and all these things? You bet I do. I think your wait times on calls can go down. I think your attentiveness through visits can come down. I think your ability to communicate with your government can be enhanced. I think there's a lot to be said for adding a good technology basis behind a lot of these departments. And then some of it, as DOGE has recommended, and they're part of a political move to drop the Department of Education. But that's a big budget saver because we're stopping the repetitiveness on payment systems. We can move all of the benefits of the Department of Education under Treasury and under other things. It's a restructuring, not an elimination of benefits. It's a restructuring, all of which is designed to reduce cost. But the Department of Education itself has spent, since 1979-80, when it came into be, I think the number's $3 trillion. That's a lot of money. And it spent it at a time when American educational scores went from second in the world to like 27th. So we have not seen success out of that $3 trillion spend. We've seen quite the opposite. And if we look at that, that is all we need to continue going through it. And again, I apologize for the buzz. That's because I get so many calls and texts about these things. And this person is asking if I really do think that DOGE is going to be able to cut the budget. And the answer is yes. I think they're going to be able to at the end of the day. But we need to look and say, okay, like the Department of Education, can we get rid of it without losing any of the benefits? The answer is yes. We have to. And then we look through the other departments and say, can we get 10%, 15% savings? I'm certain we can. And there's the $1 trillion. So is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it effective? And then the final one I would look at and say, is it accurate? And I will tell you on that level, I'm a little bit nervous. This, again, came up from somebody that I just got a question through questions at stevebeamangroup.com. And they were saying, are the DOGE numbers accurate? Generally speaking, they are. But as any huge enterprise, are they completely accurate? No. And I think that's something we need to watch. And that gets back to transparency, because we want to make sure that DOGE is doing the accurate accounting on things and not using a politically generated accounting bookkeeping system. I don't think we've seen that to date, but you very well could. There's no question about it. We want to watch out for that to make sure that DOGE isn't caught up in a political ideology rather than a factual ideology. So legal, absolutely. Impactful, no question. Ethical, most, depending how it's handled, but yes. Accurate, I think so. And that's about the best you can get at on something like this. So as you're going through your day and you're looking at DOGE and you're thinking, okay, is this good or bad for us? I don't care what you think of Elon Musk. He is not DOGE. It's a different enterprise than him personally. What it is a group trying desperately to cut the budget so that we don't have this economic catastrophe that is on the horizon for us. Let's hope they're successful. Let's wish them well. I'd like them to continue to be ethical. I'd like them to be accurate. I'd like them to be fully disclosed so that we know everything they're doing. I think only through that, we're going to be able to have some confidence that these budget cuts were necessary and okay. And so let's keep the faith in DOGE, I think, for now. Potentially, it's an enormous impact. And again, it will go down in history as the Roosevelt type thing. Going back a little to that, we've talked about Social Security as part of the Roosevelt programs. He was supported by like the chairman of Goldman Sachs, very, very wealthy man. He had other hugely wealthy people in his cabinet and his board of advisors. It's not unusual for a president to do that. So it's not unusual for Musk to be there. It's maybe a little bit unusual for him to be as involved as he is. And again, we'll all look to see that come down. But I want to bring up a couple interesting points to everybody. Elon Musk used to be a Democrat. Now, I don't like this program to get overly political, so I don't want to say, well, now he's a great Republican. I think what you have is the first time in politics where even Trump isn't really a Republican. I think what you have is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and then you have this populist idea. It's a populist ideology driven by common sense. And that's where Elon fell in. He said, I can't go to the ideological sides anymore, but I can go to common sense. I'm looking out for my children's benefit and my grandchildren, and I see a fiscal collapse coming. He's not alone. A lot of people see that. So what he did is he said, I want to go be part of a solution. And that's when he joined the Trump train, because what Trump's doing and what he did was coalesce together a populist mandate, in effect. So Elon jumped ship from Democrats to ostensibly the Republicans, but it's really more of a populism. And he said, I'm going to come in there to help cut waste, fraud, and abuse out of the government. He created DOGE to do that, and now we're seeing whether they can do it. So I think that as you look at DOGE, if you look beyond the personalities, just to the facts, again, we look to hit that $600 billion mark, and I think we're going to hit it. Now, going back just to cover some things that we talked about last time, I've had a lot of people ask me about this Ponzi scheme stuff again. In fact, I wrote an article about it that we'll have published soon. Social Security, a Ponzi scheme really is paying people with new money coming in. So you could argue that under a pure empirical definition, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. By the letter of the law, it's not. It's a transfer program. So we're bringing in people into the system who are then paying people going out of the system. That has worked because we've been in a massively booming economy for 70 years, and we've had a demographic underpinning that will served it well. That's all changing. We no longer have the demographics in our favor, and we don't have the budgets in our favor. We don't have the kind of economic growth that we had in the last 70 years. So I think as you look at that, I'll just state it again. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's a redistribution and a wealth transference program. If I'm young, I'm not happy about it because I'm transferring my wealth to older people. And you're saying, I don't have that wealth to transfer. Well, it's happening. We can only hope to sustain it for you, and the way to do that is to extend the retirement age. But we're going to continue to watch this stuff on DOGE, on tariffs, and on the markets, because those three things all play together. DOGE is going to be there to cut not just the budgets, by the way. They're looking at regulations too, and that's a big part of this administration's agenda is to cut regulation. It's important to note, I was interviewed and they said, what drove companies to leave the United States in the 70s and 80s? Was it labor rates? And I said that was part of it, but it was also regulation. Government makes it very hard for business to operate in the United States. Between environmental issues, labor regulations, all the kinds of regulations that come out of Washington and the states, it makes it extremely expensive for businesses to do business here. So part of this agenda is to deregulate. And if we can deregulate, together with recapitalize and lower labor rates, it's all good. And again, going back to that, somebody said to me, when you say lower labor rates, how is that possible? China has lower labor rates than we do. On a per capita or per person basis, they're a lot cheaper. But on a productivity adjusted level, the United States is far and away the most productive country in the world. Our workers using technology as they do and with the information they have on how to operate are much more efficient. So a product produced in China takes 10 people. Here in the United States, it might take one. Well, they can have a per capita labor rate benefit. We have the productivity benefit. So labor rates are not going to keep manufacturers out of the United States. Regulatory systems will, and employment regulation, not numbers. But we're seeing that change in the favor of business, and that's why we're starting to see some companies come back into the United States. So I think the next months, we're going to see very actively economic situations changing in some of the, really manufacturing towns of this country. Yesterday, when Trump announced his, quote, Day of Liberation, he was attended by members of the United Auto Workers, all of whom support big what he's doing. Well, they're hopeful, of course, that using these tariffs, you're going to bring companies back into Michigan, into Flint, Michigan, and Dearborn, Michigan, and these other places. I think it could work. I'm hopeful that it will. I think we need to see this negotiation continue and clean up. So let's, make it happen. But so we're talking about, the economy and Social Security and tariffs and DOGE. I welcome you again to ask questions at questions@stevebeamanshow.com. We want to answer any of them we can. It's a complicated thing, but I think we can work together and simplify it and come up with solutions that make sense for you and me. But right now, just to recap today, DOGE is legal, it is ethical, it is effective, and it should be pretty accurate. So when we try to cut this $6 or $7 trillion budget down, cutting it by 10% or 15% should be doable, and that's that $1 trillion savings. So all of that's good, and we'll keep looking at that as we go forward. So anyway, that's what we wanted to talk about today. When we get together next time, I'll answer more questions. Of course, questions@stevebeamanshow.com, and visit us on all the social media. We'll keep up on our website, by the way, these other interviews that I do, because I am interviewed almost daily now by other TV shows and other radio programs, and we'll start to include some of that, which is all good. But I appreciate your joining me here on the show, and anytime we can answer a question for you, make sure you let us know. So thanks once again. This has been a pleasure, and I'll meet you next time on the next episode of The Steve Beaman Show.